interesting stuff. So I'm going to just say hello to you, Ramin Nazer. Thank you very much for being here, for your time.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And thank you for your time and for allowing me to reschedule this at least 7 times. I think
No,
it's somewhere between 7 and 10 times where I canceled on you in the last second.
More like something between 10 and a million. No, it's all right.
And I feel it was meant to be today, because I really feel like it today. And oftentimes I'm like, oh, I don't feel like doing this thing. But today I was like, okay, I'm ready to jump back into it. So
Great.
it was
That's
meant
awesome.
to be today.
I'm happy about that.
Me too.
I want to thank you because you gave me the idea of having a scheduled calendar or something like that, one of those apps for that. Because
I did?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, that surprises me.
Before.
That really surprises me. Okay, yeah. I don't feel like I'm someone that gets people more organized with their calendars, but perhaps I did.
Yeah, of course. I didn't have one, and you asked me for the link to schedule your appointment, and I was, oh shit, I don't have one. What am I gonna do? I get all nervous, and then I started investigating, researching a bit, decided for one, and sent you that. So yeah, thanks for that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I was just trying to make my life easier, because when I'm a guest on other people's shows, oftentimes they send me that link where I get to choose the date. So with yours, you didn't have one, and I'm like, I'm not going to write it in the calendar. The most I'll do is this motion with my finger. So you got me the link, and I pressed it with my finger, and then here we are, 10 to 1 million reschedules later.
Now it's great to be able to, because I mean, people from different places in the world, we're starting to get together in these virtual ways and connecting, and I mean, it would be a complete mess to schedule something that is during your waking hours and mine, or perhaps in our cases, I don't know how much difference we do have, but somebody from India or from another very distant.
Oh yeah, I've done that. I had a guest he's from India, but he currently lives in Berlin. But yeah, we were recording early in the morning for me and late at night for him. Yeah, complete opposite times.
Different there.
Mm-hmm.
And we were speaking a little bit before we started. I kind of lost the thing that we were talking about, and I thought it would be great to start recording because we were kind of in a flow. And this happens that before you start recording, you're so chill, and when the recording begins, you're suddenly all pressured by, oh, now it's true, now it's something.
Yeah, especially record early on, because this is one of the earlier episodes of your show, so you haven't discovered the rhythm of it yet. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of pressure in your head. It's only in your head that, I need to make sure this is perfect. I can't start it like this. It needs to start flowing right away. If it's not flowing immediately, then people are not going to listen. And I'm going to be one of those other podcasts instead of Joe Rogan Experience and Duncan Trussell Family Hour. I'm not going to be big. So yeah, it's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves. But really, whatever it is you do, you're going to come out as you, and you'll see that. So it doesn't matter if we're not in the flow in the beginning or if we are. But I do remember what we were talking about, and we were talking about your hesitation as to whether to release episodes immediately or whether you wanted to record an intro with just you talking about your backstory and what this show is. And I think you should do that one. And I don't know, just do it today. Just say you're going to sit down for an hour today and force yourself to talk into the mic after you've already warmed up with this guest talk. Yeah. Or get a friend. I don't know how many friends you have around you, but if you have someone just in the room and they can be quiet while you talk at them, that could be a good formula too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had great podcasts before that I've already recorded. And in fact, the first one I did, the guest turned it around on me and told me, oh, so if this is going to be your first recording, let me interview you. And I was totally caught off guard. So I don't know, I'm not very sure about that one. But it did give me the opportunity to start getting my ideas straight in my head of what my story, my backstory, what I want to share about my backstory. And it's helped me a lot since. And part of the idea behind the show is to, I mean, I really like podcasts like the ones you mentioned. And so I would really like to just have, free conversations, and just with like-minded people particularly. And I also like exploring topics like perhaps consciousness, healing, ancient civilizations, the supernatural, paranormal, all the weird stuff, all the
Yeah, woo woo, the
stuff.
fun stuff.
Correct, the fun stuff, the stuff that lends itself to hours of unended.
Mm.
So it's been very important for me, the idea of the expansion of consciousness, of learning new stuff about ourselves, going going into realms that are very hard to bring back to the physical world. and
Yeah.
and I've had several experiences of the kind, which have opened up my perception of life. Before, I used to be very very square in a way.
Were you atheist? Were you agnostic? Were you religious?
I would say I was agnostic, but I was nothing. I mean, I
Nothing.
wouldn't. Some many times people like identify with those tags, and oh, I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic. Looking at it from today, I would say I was agnostic, but I always sensed or intuited there was something more to life, but I didn't feel like exploring it, or like I was gonna be able to discover it. So it was something I put on the background of my consciousness, I think.
Yeah, the big answer just in the background. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
We don't really like to think about the big stuff, and we
Yeah,
think
just
about what email we have to reply to or that bill, which nothing wrong with those bills and nothing wrong with that email. But yeah, it is funny how much we're just walking around not knowing what we are, and we say we'll think about it later. I guess because it's too big of something to take on. What pushed you over the edge? What made you go from a nothing to a man that does a podcast about the big questions?
mm, I would say it was psychedelics,
Which
maybe
one?
LSD.
LSD. So
Yeah.
is that the only one you've tried?
No, but I mean, first, perhaps like many others, cannabis. But I would say that this real expansion of my consciousness, and an acceptance of of there being more to life, and myself having the ability to connect with that. I would say that was LSD, because I really felt it was like the filters of my mind were removed in a way, or expanded, and I received, um, let's say, information from the world through my senses and whatever, that I realized was already there, but I had never perceived, because I was so closed to it. So yeah, that was probably what started my journey.
Very cool. Yeah, and that's a big lesson right there, that the fact that it's always there. And we think that we go to these crazy worlds, but it's already right here. We're just, our filter is so finely tuned to only pick up sensory data that is relevant to our physical survival. Because if we had all that other stuff, then it's hard to make sense of anything. But we're just kind of fine tuned to pick up motion and different like levels of light or smell or sound or things like that. But things outside that realm of our monkey being surviving, like we don't really know that well, which is why it's tough for science to get close to that answer. Or maybe it gets closer and closer every year, but it's hard for it to kind of hold the whole answer without, you know, crazy imagination woo woo stuff being mixed in with it. And we're seeing them kind of merge together now. Like before, you couldn't talk about consciousness in the physics community, panpsychism, things like that. Now you're seeing all these people who would have been very hard-nosed, stubborn materialists kind of being like, well, maybe there is some kind of truth to the panpsychism. Not saying all the New Age people are correct, but also not saying they're all full of shit either. So that's where we are right now, and we'll see where it continues to go with help such as yourself and me and whoever else wants to normalize this kind of talking. Where do you live right now?
I live in Uruguay.
Oh, cool. Interesting. I've never been before.
Mm. It's a
Were you
pretty,
born and raised there?
yeah, it's a pretty awesome
What
place.
is it is it strict with psychedelic use or cannabis use? What's the legality there?
Well, for a long time, I mean, until today, even today, there's this the same ban, this kind of international ban on psychedelics. But here, smoking cannabis was always legal. It used to be illegal to have. You could smoke, but you couldn't have. A kind of paradox. But I think it's been already 4 years or something like that since they legalized or decriminalized it. I don't know what the correct word would be, and it's become something that you can buy on pharmacies, or there's another way in which people can create a kind of a social club or a cannabis club, something like that, where they grow their own, and people are allowed to have a certain number of plants, but it's still a law that I would say still needs to get improved, in my opinion, because, for example, something that I don't like, perhaps is a little bit of the paranoid in me. You need to register in order to be able to buy.
Mm.
And perhaps it's not just paranoid, but it's also, you wouldn't have to register for beer or for cigarettes or who knows, for aspirin or whatever, or for tea or coffee.
Yeah.
So why would we have to register for this? And there's this possible conflict of interest, perhaps, governments being the ones that regulate, or not just a regulation, but them being the ones in charge of this through pharmacies. It's kind of weird. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like they always get their mitts into it. I'm not sure what the alternative is. Like, I'm not an anarchist and I'm not a libertarian and I'm not a bleeding heart Democrat or Republican either. I don't know what the correct balance of having the government involved. I did used to feel that paranoia of not being registered, and then you kind of realize, well, they're listening to our phone every second. They already know everything, and we've kind of been living in that reality for over a decade now. So you let go of privacy. That's something that's come up recently, how we as human beings we're comfortable letting go of privacy for convenience. Before we were like kind of clinging to privacy, but if it means logging into a website faster because of your Facebook login or something like that, we're more likely to click that, or log in with Google, like log in with this stuff that already knows your location and information, just to save a few seconds rather than using DuckDuckGo or things like that. Eventually you just kind of let go and be like, look, I'm not trying to blow up a government building or start a cult or anything. I'm sure I'm going to be fine. But I do get that paranoia of, it would be nicer if you could just be a free person that could grow what you wanted and not have to give up everything for
Mhm.
the government. But honestly, I don't know much about the level of strictness of your government. Coming from the States, we're very ignorant of, we don't even know our own laws, let alone other countries or even our neighbors.
No, there's so much information for you guys. I mean, it's a giant country. And here, what I've resolved to do, or I mean, it's not just through convenience or being a rebel to the system. It's more from a place of healing, from a place of continuing to expand my consciousness, my self awareness. I realized that cannabis wasn't working for me. Um, I mean, it was working for me, but it was showing me something that I needed to confront about myself, and I was using it to evade. So I would
Mm.
I would smoke and try to distract, but always in the back of my mind, inside my heart, I knew, hey, you need to get your stuff in order. You need to I mean, I was really making this podcast, for example. It was really a really scary experience at the start, being like, oh, am I going to be a public person? Is anybody going to reply even to my emails? Who's going to want to come? Then I don't know, thinking about the, the possibility of uploading it to creating a website, or the money involved in all these things, the newness, the novelty perhaps of all the experience. It was really scary. And in part, cannabis was showing me that I can, and that I should, and I was just, as I was saying, distracting and trying not to, I was using it as a crutch,
Yeah.
rather than as a tool for expansion. And I realized that I needed to stop smoking, that my relationship needed to change with the plant. And yeah, and I haven't smoked in, I don't know, a very long time. uh, Perhaps every now and then when I get with friends or something like that, and a very special occasion, I might, but not very much, for sure.
I
And
get that. That happened to Graham Hancock too, I think. He used to smoke
yeah,
all the time. Same with
I
Terrence
realized I
McKenna.
became more, I wouldn't say productive as in, oh, you need to be productive, but I realized I started tackling those issues that I was avoiding. So yeah, I feel like it's given me this kind of magic power, and I don't need to smoke it to get it anymore.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. What's the Ram Dass quote where, doing it? No, that's a McKennaism.
Alan
Doing it
Watts.
on the natch.
Oh
And
my, yeah.
just
I was
the whole
thinking of
idea that, which one?
I was thinking of Alan Watts. Once you get the message, hang up the phone. But yeah, you were saying.
Oh, yeah, that's the other one. Yeah. I love that one. I steal that one all the time.
Mm.
And the way that, you know, your brain, all of you, you're made of drugs already, so you should be able to tap in. Like DMT is synthesized in the pineal gland, like we are a soup of drugs. So anything we do, we should be able to tap into those states without the use of substances. Easier said than done. I'm not saying I can currently get into the LSD state or the DMT state just by sitting here and oming or doing some mantra in my head. I'm far too impatient to get to those states. But I genuinely do believe that there were beings such as Neem Karoli Baba, or name any of these other mystics that could get into any ecstatic state they wanted without the use of any altering substances. There's even that story of Ram Dass giving Neem Karoli Baba, the heroic dose of LSD, and then he watches him putting it in his mouth and watching it dissolve, making sure he didn't palm it or anything, and nothing happened because he already lived in that place. And when you don't need to take a bus to Detroit when you live in Detroit, I think is the line from that. It's going to be an all McKenna, Ram Dass, Alan Watts episode. That's what podcasts are now. It's like you just quote these three dudes and then occasionally some Carl Jung if you can wrap your mind around it.
But
So
those those
you
were
like
great minds that really, in my case, they really opened me up, as well as perhaps other substances. But yeah, it's just pointing to something that you already know. I don't know if you had the same experience, but with McKenna, for me, it was very much like listening to my own mind, in a way. Like, he had the words to put on thoughts that I already had, but I wasn't able to think them, in a way.
Yeah, because he's so articulate and he can just put together sentences after sentences of anything that would make you understand the concept in a better way. And what is a better way? Well, it's a quicker path. And what is a path? Well, your brain is composed of paths, and your paths are, and he would just kind of keep you locked into, he never would say a concept and then brush over it. It's like he would explain concept after concept after concept. And it's interesting hearing his backstory because he was this scrawny, nerdy kid, and he's growing up at a time where bullying was very much prominent, and he would have to avoid bullies by telling them stories. He would keep them at bay by just being the bard that he was, being like, well, there was once a boy and his brother, and they would go to La Chirera, and they would do psychedelics, and they would see these elves, and so the bullies would just keep away from them.
Mm.
So who do you like other than Joe Rogan, Duncan Trussell? What are some other podcasts that are currently on your queue?
I'm listening to the new Thinking Aloud.
Thinking Aloud, that's familiar. Who's that?
Yeah, that's Jeffrey Mishlove, and
Don't
he
know him.
actually there's a few from the, I think, from the 80s. There's a few. He had this show, perhaps on TV, and there's like clips from then. It was called Thinking Aloud, and now he started a few years back. He started the new Thinking Aloud show. He's continuing those type of interviews. You've probably seen, there's one with McKenna from back then, and yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's really cool, exploring all the paranormal, parapsychological stuff.
And this is a podcast?
Yeah, it's a podcast, and you can also find it on YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah, it's very good.
Thinking Aloud. What other ones?
Through you, I started checking out Michael Garfield's Future Fossils.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
But I haven't continued very much. I see how through starting to record and, well, through many other things in life, you start having to be very picky. And I used to be like, I would listen to every episode of Duncan's, for example, and now I know there's a few that I haven't listened to yet, and I don't know if I will ever be able to get to them.
No, you can't catch up. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And that's without the Patreons and all these other things that are going on.
And there's people posting like even daily or 3 times a week. So it's so much information.
I like it.
Like the Room Soup.
Room Soup?
Yeah, it's really good.
No. See, there's so many of these, and we're not even getting started yet. There's going to be, everyone is going to have a channel, and I think there's going to be multiple, there's going to be this granularity to the channels where it's, okay, it's not just my podcast, but also my music station is here, and here's my visual art. And not that everybody is going to do everything, but before, the age of specialization is over, it's just kind of the lid has blown off and the worms are all out and everybody's doing everything now.
You think we're going to be like Renaissance people?
100%. Not to say that I can't get hit by a bus tomorrow. That is independent, but the macro is, we're heading into a new golden age Renaissance, following this dark period that we're in right now. I don't know how quarantined you guys are, or, I mean, the general state of the world does have this feeling of, uncertainty. We're not in that golden age yet, but the old one is collapsing, and we don't know how much bloodshed there will be. Hopefully very minimal, but whenever there's a birthing process, there is some bloodshed, metaphorical or actual. And I'm not saying people should riot or hurt people or property, but it seems like it's already doing that without me. And just for the tools alone, though, before you had to own a recording studio, you had to own paint, you had to own all this raw material. And now just the ease of access to the tools and the ease of access to learning the tools through YouTube, through people's blogs, through infographics. It's so easy to pick up new skills and innovate with these new tools that I don't know how much you've played with, like Procreate, Cinema 4D, Tilt Brush, Logic, Ableton. All these creativity tools are just unheard of 10 years ago, and we're just getting started with people figuring it out and sharing and learning to monetize it using different e-commerce platforms. And it is a golden age, it is a renaissance, but now we're kind of facing this other problem where it's, how do you be heard when everybody is so good and everybody's making everything? How do you pay the bills? There's more bills to pay, like just my health insurance, there's car, there's internet, there's the streaming services I have on my internet. I want to use Photoshop. Oh, I got to pay $9 a month for Photoshop. I want to get flash now. Oh, I got to pay an extra $7 for that. It all adds up where there's 1,000 things we're all subscribed to, and hopefully if you're lucky there's also 1,000 people subscribing to what you do through the various, whether they're following you or patreoning you or subscribe to you. It's this interlocking flow of output and input creatively and financially. So yeah, Renaissance to me at least doesn't mean that it's all good and you just get to be Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci and just paint all day and you don't have to worry about bills. But it is, in terms of output, yeah, we're for sure in a renaissance. It's the novelty curve, like McKenna talks about. It's spiking completely up. Last 10 years were that ramp up, and now we're like in this like vertical history sort of thing. Every day feels different, doesn't it? Every day feels like a new, so much happens every day. You can't keep up with even. Have you gone to Reddit before and read Out of the Loop?
No.
So are you familiar with that term, out of the loop? Like, can someone fill me on this? Why are people rioting today? Why is there this guy being arrested? I'm out of the loop. Why is everyone talking about Kanye? I'm out of, you can't even keep up with the stuff that you've left. Before you could digest the news, there would be like 2 or 3 things in the day and like, oh, I've read the news. I know what's going on in the world. Now you can't keep up with a day of news. And that's just news.
I like
that's not even
out of the loop.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in a way it's probably a good thing that people are finding it harder and harder to stay in the loop, because I mean, if what we're talking about, the loop, is like current news, and it's all, I mean, what use is all of that, for a person's life? I mean, of course, there's a few important things, but you end up finding about them through somebody, through a friend, or through Instagram, or like I don't own a TV. I haven't watched TV in, I don't know, 7 years or something.
Good.
I don't go into websites to check the news, or I even get kind of annoyed sometimes when somebody over there says something and I didn't want to know anything about it. No, but I mean, I'm happy to find out I trust and I have faith in the universe that whatever I need for staying, for thriving, will reach me. I'm pretty comfortable with that in many aspects of my life. In a few aspects, I'm still learning. Yeah, of course, there's parts of us that hang on to old patterns that we're through all this expansion of consciousness, through spiritual practices, we're learning to let go of the unreal, I think.
Oh, yeah. And it's such a paradigm shift in that before it was all about retaining knowledge and like accumulating. And now the narrative is how much can you let go of? Like, what can you unlearn today that you thought was true about yourself for 30 years? And how do you release that? How do you let go of what is no longer in resonance, even if it was in resonance every day previously? Like, how do you address that? And, yeah, and another thing about that word, in the loop, like loop implies revisiting the thing over and over again. And if you look at history, you look at news from 20 years ago, it was kind of the same. Some things have gotten better, some things have gotten worse, but the same, what's the word? It's gone. I used to have a perfect word for it. What is that? The word implying bad contention. Yeah, latest form of just contention of the world. Like it's always out of balance. The haves, the have-nots, the wars, the poor, the rich. That is this like this ongoing theme. And not that we shouldn't try to fix it or make things a little better, because I think that we do make things better overall every generation, or that should be the goal. That's like what Kevin Hart was talking about, right? On the Joe Rogan podcast not that long ago, that he's saying that if if the next generation, if I go to the future and I look and shit's the same, then we fucked up. It's supposed to be a little bit better. Like you're supposed to make things a little bit better and break records and give the next generation more tools to work with. And that's something cool about our generation. Like McKenna didn't grow up having McKenna. Same with Alan Watts and Ram Dass and those people. Like they didn't have YouTube to watch those things. We were just given it. You can watch everything McKenna said on YouTube for free. There's some ads and there's some bad music in the background sometimes, but you just get all of him to base your like world on. So I'm working with that base of like all these, you know, ascended masters from my perspective. And then hopefully I'm contributing some new layer to it. I die off, and then there's some new space kids, half robots, probably full robots, plus other thing going on that are tapping into my vibe, taking some of me, taking Prince, taking Brene Brown or whatever, and like merging. That's a weird combination of three, but you know, taking a lot of people and building upon that. So we're all these individual characters with something new and that we can contribute and that other people can hopefully use when we're not here anymore because we're off doing other things. When we're not here anymore, why would you hold on to your knowledge? You should give away as much knowledge as you can. And bringing it back to Future Fossils, that's the premise of his show, is the like, we're already dead. What are we doing in this particular slice of time that makes the future what it is? And what would you tell those people in the future right now, since we are speaking to them? Like, this lives on forever. This podcast is eternal. They can bring it back with full holograms of us. The people listening to it can embody your life, my life, and be like, what would it be like to have been in that conversation then? Even though they recorded it on Zoom, what would it have been like in the same room? What's that like? And yeah, it doesn't go away. It's pretty cool. I forget the point of all that, but you know, you listen to the same stuff I do. Sometimes these things don't have points. It's all about waxing philosophically into the ether. And how do we get excited again? Every day it's a new challenge. Like, you find Alan Watts, you're like, holy shit, this guy's getting me excited about existence again. Holy shit, McKenna, this guy's getting me excited about existence. It's so magical and mysterious and wonderful. And then you kind of get used to it. And then the day comes where you wake up, you're like, man, I don't feel like doing any of this. There's enough content out there. They've already talked about this bullshit. I'm stupid. I hate myself. This sucks. Fuck me. Everything's stupid. Yeah. And then on and on. So it's a new game every day. How do you find it? And hopefully I'm doing some of it. Hopefully I'm helping people find some of it.
Yeah, it's all about the journey. What you were saying, that's something that came to me right now. Like, you lost the point of what you were saying, but it's all about the exploration and allowing yourself to go to new places inside yourself and explore your own opinions. And I mean, you were talking about being in the loop. In part of my journey, and part of the reason why I don't have a TV is because of realizing that you gave me that idea of the loop. So it would be like, oh, you watch the news, or I was kind of preoccupied with politics, not so much, but you know, after experiences such as LSD experiences or stuff like that, you become more aware not only of yourself but of your surroundings, and you start to realize there's something unbalanced in the world. There's something wrong going on, and part of the journey at the start is you delve into that, you go down that rabbit hole, and you become depressed because there's so much negative stuff out there. There's so many screwed up things going on, and people can continue with that for the rest of their lives and never let go of that new loop in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, looking at all the idea of conspiracies and blah 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 and politics and all that, I realized, okay, so these people are doing probably whatever, and am I going to change anything by continuing to give my energy and my attention to that? Or I don't know, I was lucky enough, uh, good karma, I would say, to have met my spiritual teacher, and this was a a very important chapter of my life that
Who's
also.
your teacher? Is that relevant?
No, it's not somebody that's public. You know, it's not like.
Oh, you don't have to say their name, but just as far as a character, is it a yogi?
Oh,
Is it a close friend? It's your uncle? Like, who's the spiritual teacher?
yeah, no, he's a Taoist master. He's a Taoist, and I would say, and he's an engineer. He's a Chinese medicine doctor. Um, he's very wise, and yeah,
How do
just
you meet this character?
it's one of those people, you know, that when you're around them, you learn like through osmosis, like
Mm,
you just through their example, they teach you how how different things can be, how different you can be towards your 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 uh, your attitude towards life, just through how they go around, you know, through how they sit, to from how they speak, from everything you learn something. And yeah,
yeah.
that helped me a lot get out of that paranoid or negative loop, and showed me, like I was, you know, the idea of the when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So I
Yep.
was in that loop, but I was starting to realize I'm in a loop. And when I was clear about that, suddenly an example of how to be different, or that being different is possible, because it's not that you have to be just like somebody else, but the fact that somebody else gives you an example and shows you you can be different. You don't need to stay stuck in whatever situation you're stuck. That helped me a lot, and helped me to go out from that stupid loop of celebrities and politics and all that stuff. That's really, I mean, it's it's I wouldn't say it's worthless, but there's no need to be stuck in that. It's got its
It's
use.
a fun circus, but you don't want to live in that circus. But also,
Right.
you wouldn't wish that it goes away forever. It does have a purpose. And I feel the same way about shopping malls. I don't know if it's a correct comparison, but I mean, it is the mainstream culture, news, celebrities, shopping malls. And it's so easy to hate the shopping mall. I wish it was just like Burning Man and we would just trade stuff and, like, wear rags and that would be more human, which that's fun too. But also I like going to this big, monument of capitalism, and it's kind of got an evil feeling to it, and it's over stimulating, and it's kind of fun to go to as a circus, to be like, oh, look at this place. And I know they're going away now because
Well,
Amazon, there's
but
probably not.
but you know what? In a way, the mainstream works as a thermometer. So uh, it's okay that it's there, because it shows you like where the precisely the mainstream of humanity, where the attention or the level of self-awareness of people is, and knowing that is super important, because it helps you, like, okay, where should I, or what kind of message can be useful to move that mainstream a little bit towards a more peaceful, a more loving, blah 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 place.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing you don't want is a great compass.
Mhm.
And like with the, I don't know, fear of releasing stuff, I think fear is an excellent compass. If you're afraid to put something out, it's probably good. That's probably a sign that you should be releasing it. And I know that that can be construed the wrong way and think that, oh, so if you're just writing hate speech and you're afraid to release it, then it's, you should release it. Probably not. But, being vulnerable about your flaws, your past, putting out something that isn't perfect, and that you're going to look back on your first episode and be like, oh, that was terrible compared to episode 50. How did I even release that? But the people listening to it didn't know, because that was the first one of its kind. So to them, they don't see the flaws you see. And it's important to give give the world a chance to not like it. Stop making, yourself be the arbiter of whether it belongs in the world or not. Like, put a deadline on it and release it, and then give it a chance to fail. And more often than not, it probably won't fail as bad as you think. And if it does fail, nobody saw it fail. That's the great thing about failure, is if your thing you uploaded didn't get a lot of views, nobody saw that it didn't get a lot of views. It's a hidden thing. And I'm sure there's giants that have content that didn't get that much views on it because we just don't know that. We just know the hits that they've done.
Mhm.
And every musician I know, every artist, everyone, like, we're all sitting on so much stuff. We're sitting on it on hard drives, like, I'll release it when it's ready. And like, there's this big just base of energy that we're sitting on, so much potential. And I think that new renaissance is going to be when the scale tips from mostly sitting on hard drives to living mostly radiating that expression. And it's tough to really put our heads in now, but it is going to be this huge shift over the course of the next 10 years, like the way that the 60s shook up everything. And before, everyone was going to church wearing a suit and hat, and then it goes to tie-dye shirts, armpit hair, long hair, and all that kind of stuff. So we're living through another one of those that's even more bizarre. That first shift is not even going to look bizarre compared to what we're doing now because of the internet and because of I don't know, Neuralink, VR, AR, all this crazy stuff. I'm a fan. I think the future is good if you're fine with change, and if you're fine with I guess change is the only thing.
Yeah, which is how it's always been. I mean, we're here, and what today is the present is the future of somebody before us, and it's pretty good. And the constant thing has been change. I mean, if people aren't open for change, I don't know what they're doing here. I mean, there's it's a great skill to learn to embrace transformation and to learn to transform yourself with the change, so like flowing with the river.
Yeah,
Mm.
which change itself it can get annoying because one could interpret change as just entropy. Like, imagine if there was so much change that you can't even make sense of this or that. Like, if you woke up and you're in a different body, and instead of legs and arms, you have one tentacle and some wheels. And then once you finally learn to move around with this body, then it changes into something else. And if it's just nonstop change with no consistency, then that's a tough environment to grow in. But as far as human beings, which were these spiritual individual units of consciousness that are playing out a game in these physical bodies, it's a nice learning space where we can still have the stubborn physical reality. I know that if I put something in the cupboard today, I know that it'll still be there tomorrow, because that's how the physical world works. It's not like a dream where I'm in this scenario and then I blink my eyes and then I'm in another room and there's no continuity. That's kind of annoying. But we're in this stubborn physical reality with just enough woo-woo to learn, to manifest stuff, to create. So it's this good balance of a school where it's not too changey and it's not too not changey, where we do that. And I don't know how much you've looked into these, law of attraction, the secret, manifestation, imaginal techniques. But if we really could imagine reality and it was unrestricted, we would live in our worst fears oftentimes. And the moment you thought of a fear like, oh, it would suck to be in prison for 10,000 years. And then all of a sudden I'm in prison for 10,000 years. And then 10,000 years is over because I manifested it. It was too quick. But as we're getting more and more in the future, it's easier to manifest your ideas through technology. I can make someone come to my door with food by just tapping on this rectangle I own, which I don't even know how it works. I don't know how any of the wiring in it works. I can communicate with people. We're talking on Zoom. Don't know how Zoom works. Don't know how the Wi-Fi works, but it works. And anything we want to happen can happen if we focus our intent on it. And it's getting more like that, which is good and bad depending on how much control you have. But that's one idea of it's a game, it's a school. We're learning to be a better manifester and work together as one instead of to serve just ourselves. I think makes sense.
Yeah, people can get stuck in looking at this as a prison or as a punishment, and I've talked to people with that outlook, but in a way, it's kind of like they kind of wanna say that, but how much do you really believe that? And you're still here. I mean, if you're still here, you kind of know that there's some learning and some fun in all of this experience. How did you? I was meaning to ask you how you got to this place in the way you look at the world, in the way you think. You asked me about my origin story in a way of this. How did you ever have a mystical experience?
I would say it's more of an incremental thing. I wasn't a square who then snapped and became this way. I felt like I was always this way, but it's nudged me more and more. And psychedelics do play a part in that. But I remember as early as, being 10 years old and just kind of staying up all night, wondering, why am I a me? Like, why am I existing? And why is my existence at this resolution? How come I'm not a galaxy? How come I'm not an amoeba? Why am I at this exact resolution of a trillion cells and, however many neurons I have? Why am I this? I'm a symmetrical primate, which it's split down the middle and it's symmetrical and there's day and night. There's a big ball of fire in the sky called the sun and a moon. Why is there this stuff? That doesn't really, I don't know. It doesn't really add up. None of the religions make sense. Atheism puts chance as its God, where it just says, oh, it just came into being randomly and then it goes away and that's it. It's a flash in the pan, randomness. But then randomness becomes your God. And, randomness is just the inability to perceive the pattern. And I don't know what the pattern may be, but I guess over time you start to, you develop the self. You start out as nothing, you develop an identity, and then you have to release that, not have to, but you release the identity through the psychedelic experience, whether that involves taking psychedelics or just kind of merging with oneness. And then when you kind of see it simply like that, it's easy to think of the whole universe as a big complicated thing with just unlimited variables interlocking, and how am I going to wrap my head around all that? But then when you boil it down to just, there's the whole thing and there's the splitting from the whole thing, then you're like, oh, I'm infinite, but the only thing that infinity, God, omnipotence, omnipresence, like the infinite everythingness, the one thing it doesn't have is limitation. So it wants to experience limitation, and it does that through splitting off into various beings. Like, I am limited, you're limited, we have different points of view, thus building out a more interesting, complex reality in those limitations. And through expanding those limitations, because if we had it all now, there's nothing to do, everything would stand still, it's complete already. So it splits off into these incomplete things that then try to make itself more complete and expansive. But as far as when I realized that, I don't know. It's like every 5 years, it's like a new little upgrade. You're like, oh, and then 5 years later, oh, I had no idea what I was talking about 5 years ago, and so on, and so on, and so on. But
Yeah.
sure, acid, DMT, mushrooms all help. Same with just listening to YouTube. Same with just sitting still. Just sit still and realize that you're the only voice who's ever been in your head. Even if you have someone else's voice stuck in your head, it's still you doing their voice. It's only been you this whole time. And that can trigger loneliness, so we don't like to do it. But when you get comfortable with it, you're like, oh, this is very important. This conversation I have with myself, very important. When I'm talking negatively to myself, that ain't good, because that's the whole thing. And if I'm talking negative about others, also not good. But take that with a grain of salt, because I do like to talk shit, and I do like gossip, and I do like people that also speak like that, because it's funny, and humor has a place in things. I've got friends that don't gossip or talk shit at all because it's toxic, and no, we don't do that. It spreads bad vibration. But I feel like you're still limiting yourself then. You got to be a little bit, have both.
It's really
I don't know.
important
What's that?
it's really important what the reasons behind our actions are in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the intention behind it. Sometimes someone is saying the truth, and because their intention is wrong, you don't hear it.
Yeah, and you were talking about gossip and that kind of stuff. I mean, if your intention is to make funny and to make somebody laugh and just be funny, I mean, sure, don't overdo it, but just having fun is cool. But if the intention is just talking shit for talking shit's purpose, I mean, yeah, it's not something that adds anything really to the world. In fact, it might just be detracting something from yourself. You're focusing on negativity all the time. So it's not.
Yeah, and it is projection. Anything you don't like in someone else is something you don't like in yourself, and you're projecting that because you know that deep down you're capable of that too, and we're all capable of the most heinous acts possible, and we're all capable of the most beautiful, loving acts possible. And that's what any conspiracy, you go down that rabbit hole, like you you go to where it goes all the way to the, the police, to the banks, and then not just the banks, but the occult that rule everything. Not just the occult that rule everything, they're also interdimensional aliens feeding off your fear. And it's not just interdimensional aliens, but it's also you. It boils down to you in this moment and the choice of love versus fear. So any conspiracy, you end up back at yourself, and you realize that, oh man, it's my perception that's doing all that. It doesn't matter about the reptilians or the banks or the grays. Like, this is all still just a game I'm making up in my head with all those characters and wardrobe changes and scene changes, and it is just the same thing. And it is your responsibility to tend to the part of the garden you can reach, which is in your own head and heart. All this is so sanctimonious. It's so easy to just talk like that and then not do it. The facing it when you're alone is tough. It's easy to talk about the stuff when I'm facing you or a friend or something. And when we are by ourselves, it's kind of like we can abandon these thoughts very easily and get back into our loops. So I don't know. A lot of these are like, it's about generating temporary tools that can help you through the day that we get from other podcasters, music, things like that, a new angle at which to look at it and integrate into yourself. And then one day it doesn't work anymore because you've integrated it and it's part of you. So you need the new epiphany. That's something that really, I've been thinking about epiphanies and how today's epiphany is tomorrow's. Well, yeah, no shit. Everyone knows that. And it's so interesting how it matters where you are in your life and when you hear it and who tells it to you. And, you can hear Eckhart Tolle say we're all one after he goes on his big rap. But if just some guy says we're all one, it's like, yeah, whatever. Fuck you. We're all one. Doesn't matter. So it really matters how you arrive at the epiphany. Is it yours, or if someone's just telling it to you? Isn't it like anything learned has to be experienced? It can't be told to you. You do have to learn it yourself. I'm not a parent, but I realize that that's very frustrating for parents, that they know what their kid should do and the kid cannot do it because they haven't experienced it. They have to break their own leg. They have to make those mistakes themselves, or it won't be integrated. So yeah, it all comes down to your own experience, regardless of what you and I say. The people listening to this have to go and experience the things themselves before any of this will stick.
Yeah, totally. Not everybody needs to go through the same path, and I mean, there's this time when you're an idealist and you go, oh, everybody should take LSD, or But then you realize, I mean, whatever, it worked for me. But now that I've, like you said before, now that I've integrated that experience or that information, I realize it's always been inside me. So maybe somebody else, and it really happens. People get to very similar. I mean, the truth is the truth. So people reach it through different paths, but it's still the truth.
Yeah. And there's many truths. And I had something there. I forgot it though. Doesn't matter. Maybe I'm not meant to say it yet. Maybe it's something meant to be said at the end.
We aren't ready. We're great wisdom.
Yeah, this is a powerful bomb I can't drop for another 2 years. The world just isn't ready for it.
Yeah, your higher self put the brakes on that thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all becoming our higher selves again. There is this ascension thing happening, and I think about it in terms of art a lot, how a lot of people are showing their inside self before they show their outside self. So there's a lot of people with art accounts and they don't show their face or their voice, and they're showing what's inside of them. So there's people who you might know their art, but you've never seen their face before or heard them. Or there's people whose podcasts you heard and you haven't seen their art. We're all sharing different aspects of the internal, eternal self. And it's intermingling with other people's stuff, influencing each other at a quicker and quicker rate each day. And when we think about the phrase "we're all one," and we're heading back into that, like we're merging back into one, it can incite fear, because then it's like, oh, I lose my identity. I don't get to be a me anymore. I get to be a blob. I'm part of the Borg. I don't want to be the Borg. And I don't think it's going to be like that. I think we are going to retain our individuality with access to everyone at the same time. I don't know how much you use Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, but with just a tap, you're looking at the point of view of another person around the world in high definition video, with filters on their face, with someone else's songs. Like, it's clearly all merging together. Before, you didn't have that. Now you can just see through other people's eyes in China, in Minneapolis, just instantly. Just China and Minneapolis, nowhere else. And yeah, that's going to expand more with whatever happens, AR glasses, Neuralink, whatever next thing, because we're not done. Remember, they thought we were done at the VCR, then the computer, and then the internet's the fad. The internet's not going anywhere. Okay, the internet's here, but Facebook, that's a fad. Okay, Facebook is the basis of everything. All right, then who knows? Like, all these, the internet builds on itself, on itself, on itself. The old internet is still here. Everything we made on the internet in 2002, you can still find somehow. So it's eternally building on itself in complexity. And once again, I ended up at a point where I don't know what the point is. It is good to have some point. I get that it's all about the journey, but when you watch a show you like and the whole show was great, but then the ending sucks, you're like, I did enjoy the journey, but you could have done something with the ending, at least trick us into thinking you had an ending. If you don't trick us, like if the last scene is just the writers in the writer's room just doing this, it's not as satisfying as a TV show.
The thing perhaps is we for some reason psychologically we want the loop to close on itself in a particular way, perhaps. And I think it does close on itself, but when it closes, it's at the beginning again, or something. It's like it's just
the snake eating its own tail, Ouroboros.
It's a continuous journey with points every now and then, but it just goes on. You're here, then you're not, then you're back.
Are you familiar with the Joseph Campbell story circle, the hero's journey? Yeah, so it's like that. It is a circle. The hero is in a comfortable setting. the hero gets the call to adventure, the hero rejects the call, then finally the hero through something accepts the call, then the hero goes to the underworld and then faces challenges, suffers an extreme loss, works their way out, and then ends up right back at home, having gone to the underworld and brought home some tool or knowledge or object. So you're back home, but you've got something else. So you've gone up an octave. We see this in music a lot, where it's like you return the journey, but you're up an octave. Or the way that I was listening to this thing about how harmony is just, there's infinite harmony, where you can hit a note on the piano, then you go up a fifth, you go up another fifth, you go up another fifth, and eventually you're hitting every note. And if it was in the same octave, it would be very dissonant. It would just sound like mashing the piano keys, not music, sounds like noise. But when you separate it in different octaves, then every note works in conjuncture with every other note. There's no wrong notes. And if you look at that from the perspective of a human being and your higher self and your higher self's higher self and your higher self's higher self, then every moment of suffering or discord is actually a perfect plan in the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's always something that, I mean, it requires faith, but it's something that's always there for us to continue growing, to continue expanding into the whole of what we are.
Yeah.
Which
I
you were
hate the
saying
word
before.
faith. I hate the word, but I love
Yeah,
the concept of it.
I love
The
it.
word,
Maybe sometimes it gets confused with belief or with something blind, you know, something imposed from the outside. But for me, it's something that has blossomed from inside me, you know, through different experiences that kind of light a fire inside you.
yeah. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with the word itself. It's all just relative to how much we've been exposed to that word and what other people think it means. But when you were saying it's blind faith, that is faith. Like when you have a lot of evidence towards something, then that's not faith. That's like just kind of a little bit. But if you have no reason to have any hope, in fact, if you have lots of reason to have no hope and you have faith, then that's true faith, because it's purely coming from inside. Like I just feel like this is part of a bigger arc, which it's important to see through and not just give up in this moment.
Which also connects with what you were saying about manifestation and law of attraction, all of that, because I mean, part of, you know, what we've been learning in those who have been practicing all of that, the feeling is the secret. So if you have faith that that you are meant for something big, there's no way that's not going to happen.
Yeah. And big doesn't mean that you're famous or that everyone has to worship you, but big means just when you feel like you're enjoying every moment. And enjoying doesn't mean happy or euphoria, but if you're in the larger context, I mean, we've all felt this way before. We've been in a terrible, like I've been in a dirty porta potty before, feeling sick, but still very happy, like just because like that's my state of being. And then I've been in scenarios where everything's been perfect on the outside, but then internally you're just really depressed. And it really shows how much the inside plays into, I mean, it's really everything. That's why we see, millionaires hang themselves and we think, what? They're millionaires. They're famous. How did they hang themselves? It must be a conspiracy. Why would they do that? But no, depression is real. There's people who they think they have it all and they hang themselves. And there's people that have nothing who are happier than those people that just hung themselves. So the inside is where it's at. And from the inside, you'll find that you can make the outside the way you want to, because the outside and the inside are the same thing at the deepest proton holofractal level. Like the smallest particle in your being reflects all the information in the whole universe. that seems like quite the statement. But if you do the research and look up what a proton is and realize that it's not a stubborn billiard ball of stuff, it's just a vibration, and the vibration is structured in a way that contains all the information of the universe, and that's in every single individuated smallest point is actually containing the information of the largest point, which is why I think we're capable of things like channeling and psychic phenomenon and those kind of things. I think it's because there is a physical reason as to why the smallest thing and the biggest thing are the same. It's not just magic and no explanation. It's both. It's magic with explanation because it's made of magic. Indra's infinitely jeweled reflective net of consciousness. And I think it was Jason Louv talking about the importance of the nodes themselves. Like, so if you imagine the Indra's net, it's the actual individual nodes which are important because it's those that contain the connection to the other things. And each one of us is that infinite node on the net, some reflecting more things closer than others, but we're all each individually the infinite thing. And it's so hard to get there because most of the time we don't feel infinite. We feel very limited, even though we know we've got trillions of cells at our command. Like, I can think a thought of moving my hand and making it into a fist, and it happens. It makes, like, I can make reality move with my thoughts, or I can use my hand to pick up stuff. And I'm not good at bending spoons yet or starting fires with my mind, but there's no reason to say you can't extend the thought to physical boundary like that. I think it's all on the table eventually.
Yeah, what you're saying makes me think of that object, the thing that the outside connects with the inside. I don't know what.
The torus. Yeah, and the toroid, actually hold that thought. I need to plug in the computer so it doesn't die. This will take less than 10 seconds.
Sure. I'm thinking this, he mentions the torus, but also this, it's like you can just take a piece of paper and bend it and paste the two extremes and draw a line, and the line connects back in on itself like an infinity symbol. And there's also I was watching today, there's this, I think it's a 4-dimensional object, a kind of a bottle that goes into itself. And yeah, and Ramin is back. No, I was mentioning just this idea of a piece of paper that you can draw a line and you twist it and stick it together.
Mobius strip,
that was the one. And it's, the outside is the inside.
Yes.
So the particle is the universe, the background is the foreground. I don't know, there's a million ways of explaining that metaphor.
Yeah, it's all one big soup. And I don't know, certain moments in learning this stuff, like, it's tough to recall all of it and go on the whole journey, but like when I learned that nothing touches anything else, that kind of blew my mind, where you think of your hand as being this solid thing and the table being a solid thing, and that it's the particles bumping against each other, but that's not what's happening. It's actually electromagnetic repulsion happening, where your electrons or something are spinning in one way and it's out of phase with the other thing. So it's all just this force pushing, and we're mostly empty space. Even those protons are not taking up most of the space. It's mostly empty space. Like, if you blew up a proton to be the size of an orange, it's like 2 football fields before the next proton. It's like, that's how far apart our individual particles are. And so we're mostly just empty space with force pushing and rejecting other forces. Like, none of us have ever touched anything. And then you realize that, oh, if I've never touched anything, then all of this is just kind of playing out in my head. So if I'm wishing I was in a hot tub somewhere in Iceland, like, my brain is still in its skull. It never leaves the skull. It's all just making this virtual reality here, based on what the senses are telling it. So if you really get good at meditating, you can unlock any feeling you want if you put yourself there, like, just wanting to be somewhere else, and then you realize that you don't have to be such a conqueror anymore. And there's such this human urge to conquer stuff and own it, to have control over your environment. But really, you're just a skull with the brain in it. So you should just work on that rather than trying to make the outside into what you want. And that includes people too. Like earlier we were talking about, I understand this stuff, but how do I get other people? How do I get the whole world to do LSD? How do I get them to understand what I understand? And then you're missing the point, because it's not about imposing your will on people. Even though you think you're trying to help them, you don't want to impose your will. You want to just let them learn that on their own, and you be you. And like with your spiritual teacher, does it by example. I don't know him, but he probably doesn't tell you to do stuff. He's him. And then as you observe him, you want to be more like him through observing. He doesn't tell you to do shit. Or maybe he does, but probably not, right?
No,
He doesn't tell you to do shit.
Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, it's people that, and it's something that you always want to emulate yourself and try to be as good an example as you can for others. So instead of focusing on, like you were mentioning, instead of focusing on how can everybody else learn what I learned, that's just an excuse to not continue learning yourself, whatever is the next step that you need to take, because it's really easier to push people around than to just close your eyes and go within and feel your feelings.
Yeah. Do you ever listen to like any type of motivational, or I don't know if they're motivational. They are, like whether it's Gary Vaynerchuk or Esther Hicks. But when I watch these people give speeches and they do a Q&A, oftentimes there's the question someone says where, I understand what you're saying, but how do I get my wife to see it this way? How do I get my boss to see it this way? So they're already missing the point whenever they're trying to get their guru and impose their guru's knowledge on their boss. But your boss and your wife and whoever, they're going to be them, and they're infinite too. So that's something comfortable. If you live with someone and they're irritating you, that's not fully them. There's an infinite being there, that you're not stuck with someone limited that you're annoyed with. Maybe you are, maybe you do need to get a divorce or something, but most of the time it's comforting to remember that you're infinite, and the person you're with is also infinite. So there's no limit to how your dynamic can change and be. It doesn't have to be the way it was. In fact, it isn't anymore. It already changed. It's already, every day you wake up, you're different, partner's different, world's different. So there's something comforting in that.
Yeah, for sure. Life is a mystery, and it's part of what we are learning to do in this mystic age, in these mystic times that we're living, is learning to be comfortable in the mystery, learning to be comfortable in not knowing, and understanding that there is a plan, that there is a reason for everything. It sounds so cliche because it's been, I mean, I've been recently, I started like going back into reading and watching videos about the new age and those kind of teachings, which a few years ago they were like absolutely crazy, and not 100% crazy. You know, there's this thing that I call learning to separate the message from the messenger. So many times people are saying crazy things, but mixed within that there is some stuff that resonates with you, and take what resonates, and what doesn't, just let it go. But the stuff that I used to let go because it was extremely crazy, in the last year, for example, I've been feeling more comfortable with all of that. There's still a lot that I still don't incorporate, but many of the things are making more and more sense each day.
What's an example of something you would have thrown out years ago, but then have held on to now?
Um,
Like I wouldn't have believed channelers 10 years ago, and now I'm watching channelers on YouTube channel dead people
well,
and being like, that's real.
the thing for me is that I don't know that I still believe any particular channeler, and I didn't before. But like you said before, like the possibility of channeling, for me, it's totally possible. I wouldn't be. I don't know if I am the arbiter of saying, oh, that channeler is real and that one isn't. And you're an artist, so your ideas, I don't know, who knows where they come from. I mean, we are channeling all the time. Then if you are channeling this particular alien from this particular civilization, or that's so hard and so impossible to
Oh yeah, those ones get
demonstrate for
wild.
sure. So ideas, I mean, I would listen to, I don't know, it's hard to say, because there's still stuff that I will still not uh, integrate or accept from that, but that makes more sense, you know. Like I have a hard time with something being like completely okay. This is the truth. In like if you can put it in words, it's not complete. So
Oh, for sure.
you know, there's ideas of I think you mentioned ascension, stuff like that. It used to be for me like ridiculous, but now I look at it and it makes total sense. And in fact, I think we have, I think it's just how it works. We in our individual lives we take certain quantum leaps uh, from a limited perspective into a new one through having courage to do new things, to break barriers, to go through the fear. And and perhaps before, when I was not so experientially clear on that, I would listen to that stuff and it was crazy because of the words perhaps that they use. So the words, they still use the same words, and the same words kind of make more sense in my personal experience, even though I might explain it in a different way. I think the new age is talking about the same things that I've been understanding in my direct experience, and the same things that probably most religions are saying, just that the particular words that are being used, and perhaps certain examples of something being, I don't think I will ever be able to say, oh yeah, that channeler is channeling that entity. I mean, that's a very big stretch, but the message that's coming through is the what is it that Manly P. Hall called it? The the the, the I can't remember the name. The
I feel
eternal
like it's on the tip
philosophy,
of my
something like
tongue.
that. Sorry.
Oh, I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue too, but I don't know what
The
I don't
perennial
remember the term.
philosophy, something like that. Uh,
The what of philosophy?
Perennial, or I have the
Perennial
word, but
philosophy? That could be it.
something like that. Yeah. So it's this truth, or this esoteric truth, this mystic truth that's in the core of our being, and that's always been true, and that we've been covering with our filters. And I think we're merging the two worlds, the physical world with the more um, astral or esoteric world, and I hope it's for our evolution. So I think this is a very interesting time.
Yeah, it is during an evolutionary leap because no matter how far we look back, there wasn't an internet. And it's easy to say that civilizations rise and fall, but I don't think there was internet in ancient Rome or ancient Egypt or Atlantis or anywhere. I think this is a whole new paradigm of connectivity. So I want to say that this is the time we break through. There's the tipping a soda machine analogy where when you're tipping something over, you've got to rock it back and forth a couple of times before it falls. So we could say like the 60s or something rocked it forward once, or maybe thousands of years ago, but it is at the precipice of something. And when you start to talk about exactly what that something is and say that the Arcturian aliens are coming to give us this message of 1,000 years of peace. Like it never works when you're specific. I have a friend who talks to aliens and she gets great messages from them. And whether you believe aliens or not, like the messages are solid. But even she will admit that, oh, I'm always wrong about the details, but the macro I'm always right with. And she has an interesting vision of the future where she said that there's going to be a split and half the people will live down here where there's like just chaos and cars bashing into each other. And then we will live up in the clouds. And occasionally one of them down there will raise their hands up and we'll come pick them up and save them. And so I'm wondering what that means as far as like, are we going to live in a half utopia, half dystopia, not necessarily driven by wealth, but whether you can tune into, I don't know, higher states of being or not. I don't know. It's just a thought experiment. It might be nothing like that whatsoever.
Yeah, I actually, I know who you're talking about. I'm in contact with her, and we were going to record, but she had something that, so she had to reschedule.
See, she's just like me.
Yeah. And when you were speaking right now, you made me think of something I heard, I think yesterday or the day before, that that they found in Antarctica, they found something to do with neutrinos, and the conclusion that they had is that this was evidence of a parallel universe where time runs the other way. I don't know how they reached that kind of conclusion, but this particular particle or kind of particle gave them that idea, and it made me think of the possibility of, like you were saying now, of a split. So what we call, perhaps we call it the other side, we call it the realm of the dead or whatever. Perhaps when people die, they go to this other place where they are anti alive or something, like the opposite of being alive. And then in a certain point it gets, again, they die there and are born here. So it's like again the inside and the outside. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen that image of the person growing up and becoming an old man, and then the Grim Reaper is at the center of that infinity, and then it incarnates as a spiritual being, and then it goes through that loop, and then comes back, and then incarnates, thus making the loop infinity. And had some thought about that. Oh, but nature never draws a straight line. So anytime you think of, when you think of the concept of one does not exist as just zero, then one. It does zero, then one, and then it has to pay for that one through a negative one. So when you have matter, you get the equal amount of antimatter. When you have a positive charge, there's also a negative charge. When you push on the table is also pushing back on me. That's like just elementary physics. So there is no single direction. Like, it's all balanced. You can't create or destroy matter. You can't create or destroy energy. You can move it around. So anytime you're giving the negative, the positive is outputting somewhere else. So yeah, it would make sense that if we're alive, then we're simultaneously dead in the opposite. And when they're saying neutrinos are proving that time runs backwards somewhere, that makes perfect sense. That that backwards universe has to exist for our forward universe to have momentum. Otherwise, why would the arrow of time be moving all forward? It needs to have something pushing it. And did you ever see the show Red Dwarf? It's a British sci-fi comedy. It's really funny. There's a lot of thought experiments like this in it, but they go to a universe where time runs backwards. And it's funny because like the main character gets there and then his back hurts. He's like, why does my back hurt so much? And then by the end of the episode, he sees this broken window and he's like, I know what I have to do. And then he just goes near the broken window and then he gets sucked back through it. And then the glass reassembles itself and he's on the other side of it. And it's like, oh, my back is cured. Like, so in that universe, you start as an old man and then you eventually go back inside of your mother after you get smaller and smaller. And then that makes total sense to the people living there. Like, that must be fascinating to live inside of a backwards time universe. And then they must think this is so bizarre. Like, wait, you get old? That's stupid. You start as a little thing but then how do you merge back into the one if you're not going back inside your mother? How do you just start in nothingness? That makes no sense. And then the way we speak would be so weird syntactically. They wouldn't understand why cause makes effect. Like, clearly effect creates cause. Like, what are you talking about? Effect makes cause, not cause makes effect. And then we could just debate those people for hours.
Yeah, they would tell you, go back to university to study the basics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Ramin, this has been such a great conversation. I'm really happy.
Oh, totally, man. I loved it. I enjoyed every second.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a great pleasure. I mean, your art is great. Your art is very inspiring. Or
Thank you.
Your rainbow people with their and hey, please go ahead and share with everybody where they can find your stuff, where they can find you.
Sure. It's rainbowbrainskull.com, or you can look at my name, Ramin Nazer, on Instagram, on Twitter, on just my regular website. And the podcast is also called Rainbow Brainskull. And that's enough links. I guess you can find me with that. I'm pretty open online. I'm on all the things. I wanted to ask you before you go, is this the first thing you're sharing? And as you said, you had resistance, being in the public and putting out this podcast. Like, are you currently communicating with the world through any other means? Do you write? Do you draw? Or are you completely not on the public? Because that fascinates me to really break through from nowhere. Because I'm already out there, and then I slowly add other things, but I've always been kind of a public leaning figure. So I'm interested in seeing your transition from a private to a public figure.
Well, for me, it's been a very slow process. I see people that are perhaps so comfortable or even too comfortable with sharing online, and I'm okay with it. But it's been a slow process that I try to not force myself, to publish stuff. So I do have an Instagram where I share some thoughts, but it's not something that I'm constantly uploading stuff. I would like to make it something more regular, especially now that with the podcast, which in order to be something, I think it requires more of a regularity in the uploads, and I have some music online that I've shared, but mainly the sharing of the music. I thought, oh yeah, I need to break this barrier and start sharing music. I shared one album, and I'm happy with that being the only thing that's out there for the moment. I would like to eventually continue sharing more stuff, but I think I was just going through many internal processes connected to communication and being public and sharing stuff. So I was giving more. I am giving more of a priority to feeling comfortable with that process, or allowing myself not to force myself, to conform with the idea that, oh, every once a week you need to do this and all that. There's many times where I don't feel like sharing anything on Instagram, and luckily I don't feel a pressure from Instagram or from the world community. Oh, but no, but if I don't share, I just don't care. I like to share, particularly inspirational messages, perhaps connected to healing or to understanding who we are, which is the main thing that I want to help. Is let's all remember who we are. We are not this body. We are not this mind. There is something that is experiencing the world through you, that is experiencing the world through me, and that is the thing that we were saying before, that we are one. And it feels so cliche also, so there's some resistance to it, but I think we are in a great time, and that's why I've started becoming why I started being more courageous in being out there, because I think we're in a time where I believe what I can share might be helpful for others, and especially because it's the step that I need to take personally for my own practice and my own sanity.
Right on, man. Well, you're helping the collective wake up
Mm,
with each thing you do. And yeah, there is no pressure to have to do it every day or every week, as long as it's not eating you up inside. If
mm,
it's eating you up inside because you're sitting on a bunch of stuff and you're afraid to post it, then you should post it. But then if it's eating you up inside to, punch a clock
mm.
because you're just always having to upload stuff, then yeah, it's that balance. But it sounds like you understand yourself and you're growing every day. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you to release these episodes, release more of them. Let me know when this one comes out so I can give it a push, help you get some listeners. And
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
yeah,
I mean, I'm I'm
anytime.
I'm trying to work this middle path, like we all are trying to as well. And yeah, if it's something that's going to like you said, like kill you from the inside because you're not doing the thing that you know you have to do. Actually, I had a dream, and and we might close with this idea. But I had a dream about McKenna because he was a very important figure for me. He
Me
helped,
too.
his ideas helped me very much during a very difficult time in my life. And one day I had a dream about him, and he told me in that dream, you already know what you have to do. And he didn't tell me what I had to do, but he gave me that nudge, that
Mm,
and and yeah, that gave me courage, because it was like, okay, yeah, I gotta, and in that case it's a lot of things, but that helped me become more courageous and share my music, and that was like a very first step into allowing myself to share my thoughts and the way that I and to share my insight, like you were saying.
yeah. And it's great that he appeared in your dream because, like, how could you not listen to him? And
Exactly.
try to think of him a lot, like when you're afraid of being too cliche or too woo woo or too esoteric. Think,
Mhm.
what would Terrence think?
Yeah.
Terrence would want you to go against culture and share what goes on inside.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, you
definitely.
gotta make Terrence proud. Like, let's take it to a new level.
Yeah, and
How would we impress him if he was here?
it was even after hearing one of his talks where he says, "Meet you on the other side," or something like that. He would say in one of his talks. So yeah, he's not here, but he still is. He's on the counter neutrino
Yeah.
universe. Yeah. Well, okay, Ramin, this was great.
My
Um,
pleasure,
well,
man.
I
Thanks
would
for
love
having me.
to speak again with you eventually later. So we'll
I'd
stay in
love that.
touch, okay?
I won't reschedule as much the next time, only a couple.
No, it's okay. You can do it anytime you want.
Right on, man. We'll have a good one and let me know if you need this file.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.